why is there a backlog at the NVC, and what is going on with this expedite process? Please fill us in.
Yeah, so there's a backlog at the NVC and at the Manila Embassy, essentially for one reason. And that one reason is the pandemic has led to massive staffing shortages at the Manila Embassy in particular, although frankly, there's shortages all around the world, Tanya. I saw a report actually just about an hour or two ago, and this is anecdotal, it's not necessarily factual, but there is at least one colleague of mine who is saying that while there are normally 75 interview windows in Manila, the average has only been about 3 being used. So you can just see it's dramatically a tight supply on these interviews. And so that's it. It's not that Tanya's doing anything wrong, or I'm doing anything wrong, or you, the nursing team, is doing anything wrong, or the U.S. hospitals and employers are doing anything wrong. It's really a staffing shortage. Now, to that end, Tanya and I actually participated on a call, I think that was Tuesday, Tanya.
Tuesday, yeah.
With about 15 or 20 industry leaders. And we spent all from 12 o'clock noon until about 5 o'clock. So about 5 hours.
Long day.
Every hour we would have a new call. And it was with U.S. congressional and Senate staffers. So the way the U.S. system works is we have 2 houses that run the Congress. We have a House of Representatives and a Senate. The Senate has 100 members. The House has, I think, 430 members. So it's a total of about 530 or so members. And each of those members have staffers underneath them. And almost all of them have an immigration staffer. And so the purpose of these roughly 15 or 20 meetings that we undertook that afternoon was to call attention to these problems at both Manila and around the world, these staffing shortages, and to try and work with this, to have the Congress put pressure on the embassies to come up with creative solutions. And this is a process that we've been ongoing. It takes a long time to set up one of these 5-hour meetings over and over again, 10 or so meetings. But we're making slow progress, I think. Obviously, getting a big bureaucracy like the U.S. federal government to do anything out of the ordinary is very difficult, but that doesn't mean people aren't trying. So I think the key messages here then, Tanya, are number one, the issues at both the NVC and the embassies are related to staffing shortages. It's not that the U.S. doesn't want the nurses, and it's not that there's anything flawed with any of the nursing petitions. It's nothing like that. It's simply staffing shortages related to COVID. That's number one. And number two, there is a conscientious ongoing effort of the leaders in this area. And I would include both Tanya and I on that small group of leaders who are working to try and get the U.S. embassies to work at a much higher capacity.
Yeah. Thank you for giving all that information, Chris, because I think that, for many nurses that are sitting outside the country who are trying to sending in expedite petitions, there's a lot of misinformation that happens about that. Some nurses are saying, oh, why, is it because of my employer? Maybe they don't have as much influence, or maybe my attorney's no good, or maybe the company, the recruitment company that I'm working with is not doing what's needed to be done. So you heard this from Chris directly, that is not the case. It's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just a fact that the pandemic has created this staffing shortage of staffing at the consulates.
And I'm sure what's very frustrating for the nurses who are listening in on this, Tanya, is that there are still a few windows open and a few cases are getting expedited. There does not seem to be much logic behind who gets expedited and who does not get expedited. And so it must be frustrating to find out that a colleague of yours, if you're a nurse, who maybe even started months after you, who maybe is even going to a smaller facility and maybe doesn't even have a bigger name recruiter working with them, and they get expedited and you don't. And I assure you that everyone is in the expedite queue, which essentially means nobody's in the expedite queue. And the State Department is more or less randomly choosing And I think it just comes down to that they assign all the cases to those 75 officers, and only these 3 are working this week. And so anyone who has just happened to have been assigned to those 3, they actually get expedited, and the other 72 officers and all the cases beyond them don't get expedited, even though many of those are better cases or have been in process longer and are just as worthwhile to receive those visas.
Yeah. So please, if you're watching today, or if you have friends or relatives that are watching or that you want to share with, please share this information. It's not that somebody's doing anything wrong, or that why is that person getting ahead of the line and you aren't. It's just a basic fact of a shortage at the consulate. And just to share from my side, the discussions that Chris was speaking about on Tuesday was under the umbrella of the AAIHR. So that's important also for people to know. The AAIHR is very active and very involved in the lobby in government to try and expedite cases. I think it was a really good series of meetings. It was quite exhausting. I think at the end of the day, Chris was certainly exhausted from talking, as were all of the members of the AAIHR. But hopefully, slowly, there will be a progression. So there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes that nurses might not realize.